American Racing Snobs coming at you once again. The end of the summer break for Formula One. Indycar was at Gateway. And Eric, we had the pleasure of being up in Wisconsin, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, to be specific.
I dare you to find a better place on planet Earth in the month of August than Elkhart Lake. It was gorgeous. The weather couldn't have been better. We had an awesome racetrack. We had great company. We were doing cool things for a living. You and I were both in a turn for MRN for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Got to hang out at Siebken's with the legend, David Hobbs.
The best.
You can't beat that.
The best. It was an incredible weekend. You talk about the cool temperatures, high 60s, low 70s, no humidity, just perfect weather to watch racing. And I'm always amazed. I know you also went to VIR after you left Road America. I'm always amazed when we go to these large American, I don't know if it's this way in Europe, you've been to a few, you can correct me on it, but the American sports car tracks, the amount of fans that show up, the camping and tailgating setups that they have, and the fact that when they leave, the track looks just like it was when they got there. They clean up their stuff. It's the respect for the sport is incredible when we go up there.
Yeah, it was an immense crowd at Road America. They're ready for a cup race.
They said 80,000 plus.
Yeah. And if the facility had a little bit longer runoffs, I'd say they're ready for an F1 race. That is just a classic track. If you haven't been, it's unbelievable. I didn't make it up there until last year. So that was my second trip to Road America. We also had Robbie Gordon's Stadium Super Trucks were there. Formula 3 US was there. Trans Am was there. It was fantastic weekend. And Siebken's. Holy crap.
Wow.
It's an institution. It's covered in old racing gear and stickers, and it's where all not the F1, but all the Can-Am and Formula 5000 drivers used to stay in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it's just got that vibe. And we had the best tour guide you could ask for. We basically didn't record an episode of Racing Snobs over drinks while we were just catching up with David Hobbs, talking about his book, talking about his appearance on our show, all the stuff that was too hilarious to print from his book. And Tony, I've got a feather in my cap right now. I'm going to claim this win on a technicality. I outdrank David Hobbs. Now, I brought a driver. My lovely wife was there.
Yeah, she hooked us up.
So she could drive our asses back to the hotel once we were done. But Hobbs had, by my count, 3 gin and tonic, and I only had about a 5-minute head start on him, and I put away 4 of my Captain and Diet Coke. So I believe I can technically claim I outdrank the legendary David Hobbs.
Yeah, I think we have bragging rights all the way around on this one because a lot of people have been to Siebken's. Like it's a go-to place when you're up at Elkhart Lake to Road America, but not many people had a chance to sit with David Hobbs. And I'm sure because Habbo goes in there a lot, people have been able to walk up to him, have a conversation, get a picture. We saw that. But this was different. We reached out to him. Actually, after he was on the show, he said, hey, when you guys come up, reach out to me, and I'll come by and have a drink, and we'll talk a little bit. And you even said, up until the point that he said, I'll be there at 5:30, and actually up until he walked in the room, there was a little bit of hesitation of like, I won't be surprised if we get a, hey, lad, something came up, can't make it, catch you next time. But right on cue, here came the legend, walked right in, sat down, and 90 minutes later, he finally looked down mid-sentence and was like, oh, my gosh, I got to go. I mean, he was having a good time.
And we hijacked his evening pretty good.
Great stories. We got his feelings on Senna, which was incredible.
Yeah.
That might be for a different podcast sometimes.
To recap it real quick, if you didn't hear our interview with him, what was that, 2 weeks ago, Tony, that we had Hobbs on for damn near 40 minutes.
Yeah, and you asked him who his top 10 drivers were, and he didn't include Ayrton Senna.
I didn't press him at the moment because I didn't want to interrupt his train of thought because he was on a roll, and, he's of advancing years and advanced liver age, and I know it. And I know that being the age I am, which is probably about half on both accounts of David Hobbs, that sometimes I mistakenly overlook something when I'm doing a list. I'll be like, oh, that was an obvious one. So I pressed him on it a little bit over drinks, and he said, immensely talented, but we talked about the myth versus the reality, because you look at someone who passed, especially in their prime, so publicly and so tragically through rose-colored glasses. I think we see that with Dale Earnhardt sometimes. People tend to forget what a son of a bitch he could be. And Ayrton Senna was ruthless on the track. And if you only know him from the movie, which was produced by his family, they do address it to a certain extent, but not. It's obviously a slightly slanted. You're only getting one side of that story. Not to say that he wasn't still, in my mind, easily one of the top 5 greatest drivers, but Hobbs made points about the way that he drove other people. He damn near put, I think it was Nigel Mansell, into the end of the pit wall while defending. And Hobbs said that kind of opened his eyes. And then the incident at Suzuka in '89, where Hobbs did firmly place blame on Prost for the 1988 Suzuka clash, but he thought it was dangerous, and Ayrton would have deserved a ban for what he did in 1989 to win the World Championship. So just a little bit of catching up and nerding out about our favorite sport. It was so much fun, and then we had a beautiful day at the racetrack. Had so much fun calling Christopher Bell's win. You were supposed to be in turns 13 to 14, but I don't think anybody knew just how afraid of heights you are.
Yeah, you know what? It's not actually I am, but it's not just the actual height, because I love to fly. I've flown passenger or co-pilot seat in many a small airplane. So the heights itself, I like roller coasters. The heights itself isn't the problem. My issue with heights is an open floor.
Yeah.
So like anytime I have to climb up bleachers that have the gaps in between that you can see, or stairs that have the holes drilled through them like a grate, I don't do well with that. And so I got halfway up this billboard and noticed where you actually have to stand is a drilled hole grate. And then there's no handrails on top. There was like,
just the edge of the billboard.
A 2.5 foot gap between, like you had to stand on a catwalk that you could see through. And maybe if you were Stretch Armstrong, you could reach the billboard, but you kind of had to balance yourself and maybe hold on to some ratchet straps.
No, Tony, if you had made it up there, you would have known that you can easily stand in the middle and hold on to both sides of the billboard.
I don't even want to remember what I saw.
Now,
you even said it was sketchy, and you're not afraid of heights.
No, I am very much afraid of heights. I just don't have the seniority that you do, where I can big-time myself out of a corner position I don't like.
Yeah, but I got punished because I got sent to the kink, and I said, I don't care where you send me. I'm not climbing that billboard.
Yeah, the kink is like Siberia. I was there last year. I was supposed to be in Canada corner, and after the rehearsal, I got moved around to Tony's position between 13 and 14, and it's an amazing view. You're on a billboard that's kind of hanging out over the racetrack, and I'm not over the racing surface, although I could be. I don't think NASCAR would like that too much, so I was back on the runoff area, but I was definitely over the grass that was, part of a hot racetrack, and watching cars race underneath you. And once you get into the heat of the race, you kind of forget it. But the second worst part of the day was getting up there. The worst part was getting down, because that ladder was sketchy.
I don't even know how you attempt to get down.
It was not my favorite.
It wasn't really a ladder. It was like some metal steps welded to a pole.
Oh, here's the worst part, Tony, is the support of the billboard at the top prevented you from using 2 of the top 3 stairs. So you had to kind of like put your foot sideways. You couldn't put your foot through the ladder. It was white knuckle for sure, but it was awesome sharing a broadcast with you on the Motor Racing Network. I hope to do that again in the future if the schedule is as kind as it was to my off weekend on the Monster Energy Cup Series side as it has been the last 2 years. But that was a tremendous good time. And then I jumped on a plane. My wife and I drove up to VIR. I had never been there for the IMSA race, the GT Only Challenge. What a beautiful,
pretty place,
beautiful racetrack. Yeah. And TV doesn't do it justice in terms of elevation changes. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a track and been like, oh, that looks reasonably flat or something, and then you get there. Trying to walk to the backside of Road Atlanta, the first time I went there, I was like, holy crap, I didn't realize this went straight up.
I got a chance to run a Volkswagen Jetta Pro Cup car at VIR, and it was about as much fun as I've ever had behind the wheel of a race car. It was incredible. Now, back then, the oak tree was still there. They still call it the oak tree corner, but the oak tree is no longer there down at the end of the course, and just, I mean, you could get that Jetta just pegged. It was just like ba 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 down that backstretch. But a lot of fun. And I'm glad you had a chance to take that in because it's a very cool place. All right, let's jump into the Formula One stuff because we really haven't had a whole lot to talk about, but we got a big race coming up. Obviously, we had the summer break, and for those of you that maybe are just catching on to Formula One and caught our podcast, don't know much about the summer break, Formula One has a break in which they will not let the teams work on the race car for 14 days. It's not so much that you have to shut the factories down, but you're not allowed to work on the race car. They want everybody to kind of have a chance to get away for 2 weeks and recharge the batteries, except for one specific part of the race car, the engine and powertrain, which you can still work on during that time. And the points leading team, the constructor leading team, Mercedes, according to Toto Wolff, did just that.
There's a reason why they've won 5 straight championships, and we know that Ferrari kind of has their measure when it comes to the engine department this year. So it makes perfect sense that they'd take this opportunity to try to claw back that advantage because...
Do you think they worked on trying to get more power or figured out a way to maybe make it run more efficiently from a cooling... They can't change the radiators. That's a part you can't work on. But do you think they did any workings to maybe figure out how to get the heat out of there? Or...
I think they did the emergency triage immediately after Austria because they said that the changes that they had applied to that car, what was it, practice and qualifying in Hockenheim before the rain came, the car was much improved. So I think they've done the little things that they need to do, knowing that we're not going to have that many warm weather races. If I was directing resources at Mercedes, which that must pay a pretty penny, those guys would probably want to focus on getting more grunt out of that engine as opposed to dealing with the cooling issue because I think they've seen the worst of those setbacks. Austria and a couple, you might have a little bit of a heat wave leading into Monza. I don't think you're going to see a heat issue at Spa, but every once in a while it'll surprise you.
And tell me if
what's the weather? I haven't seen it yet.
Tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. According to the weather forecasts for that region of Belgium, they're expecting very warm and hot, muggy, dry conditions on Friday and Saturday, with a cool front coming in late Saturday night, and Sunday, sunny, dry, 68 degrees.
Beautiful.
So we're going to see Ferrari flex its muscle in practice and qualifying, and then the race is going to start, and see ya.
I still think Ferrari's going to win one of these next 2 races. If it had been warmer, I'd say Spa. However, Sector 2 is a place where Mercedes can really... you can't pass in Sector 2, though. So if Ferrari really has the measure of them and out-qualifies them, I'm not sure that Mercedes has the grunt to go passing them up Eau Rouge onto the Kemmel Straight there through Raidillon. I'm not sure that can be done. So if Ferrari locks out the front row, I like their chances. However, you mentioned the weather at Spa. I mean, it's adorable that we're talking about what it's going to be this weekend on Wednesday.
Yeah.
You can't tell what it's going to be 30 minutes out from when you were there. Remember the World Endurance Series race earlier this year?
It snowed.
Yeah, it snowed sideways. It sleeted. It did everything except what they thought it was going to. So we can all, cross our fingers that the leveling factor of unpredictability will be in our corner.
Obviously, big changes at Red Bull over the break with Albon being moved up to the car, Gasly going back to Toro Rosso. I saw Pierre Gasly, a picture of him. He was getting his seat fitted at the factory. Big smile on his face. He says he's excited to be back with his Italian friends for the rest of the season, that he's rested. He's thought back about everything and ready to go racing, and I truly believe maybe a weight's been lifted off his shoulder, but as you said a week ago, he can't take a breath. I mean, he's got to power on the rest of the way. Albon now gets his chance in this seat. He said in Austria he sat down with Dr. Helmut Marko just to ask, how are things going? What's it look like for next year? And he got the news, hey, you're going up into the big car. So he's excited, says it's not the first time he's made a big move like this before, but it certainly is the biggest move he's had. But when you look at a track like Spa, is this where, Eric, you think Red Bull maybe comes back down a little bit? I mean, Honda has shown that they're not afraid to go toe-to-toe in the engine department, at least with Ferrari at a few of these tracks. But this is a big, long, on the power all the time. Do we see Verstappen and Albon kind of step back a little bit from where they were with the red car?
I wouldn't be surprised if it happened because obviously this track and Monza are the two that best suit the strong points of Scuderia Ferrari. Mercedes is still Mercedes. They're still the team to beat no matter what weather conditions, no matter what horsepower deficit you have. They still have the best driver in the world right now in Lewis Hamilton, and they've won 5 straight Constructors' Championships. So I don't think it's fair to expect Red Bull to be a world beater on a track where they're probably coming in on the back foot. So, yeah, I do think that they'll be fighting for scraps when it comes to the top 6.
We're recording this podcast on Wednesday, August 28th. A lot of rumors out there. We've talked about this guy for a long time. Actually, both drivers for a long time in the rumor mill. But tomorrow on Thursday, we could get breaking news regarding Esteban Ocon, whether he's going to Mercedes or, as many rumors point, him being signed to Renault, where he once had a chance to race until Ricciardo got signed, and that kind of put him odd man out. And Hülkenberg being out of that seat, what do you see happening there, Eric? What do your tea leaves say?
The prevailing wind says Ocon to Renault because Bottas has done enough to earn another 1-year contract.
Do you agree with that?
I think that they're choosing harmony.
Okay.
Because Ocon is a wild card who also has been out for a year. Think of
another
this
guy whose myth has grown with not being in a car.
Yeah, there's that. Plus the Netflix series put him in a awfully favorable light.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like tryout 2.0 to make sure that he's still the driver they think he is, while still maintaining the harmony with Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. And Bottas, by every measure, has earned the right to stay in that car. You don't necessarily know what Ocon's going to do in that car. Everyone thinks he's just going to come in and be Lewis Hamilton 2.0, and I don't think that that's fair.
I think Lewis and Max make everybody else look really weak.
Yeah.
And I think Valtteri Bottas has done about as good a job as I think anybody in the field could do to keep somewhat of a pace with Lewis. He at least out-qualifies him half the time. I mean, it's kind of been 50-50 on
Lewis has not been on qualifying form
who gets
this year.
the pole. He got hung out on the safety car in Silverstone. That could have been a win. I mean, he's thrown away a lot of races, some which have been his fault, many which haven't been his fault. Strategy just seems to go his way every now and then. I think Valtteri Bottas right now is a top 5 driver. I can't say that about Esteban Ocon.
Not yet.
But Ocon's the young guy, and at some point in time, with Lewis's age and all the things Lewis likes to do, you never know. They learn from Nico Rosberg. You never know. You got to have a backup plan, and I don't think they see Bottas as their number 1 driver long term.
Now, and they also have George Russell,
True.
who's doing a tremendous job at Williams. It sounds like Russell will be back at Williams for next year. Kubica's status is very much up in the air, especially with Nicholas Latifi waiting in the wings.
Yeah, and you and I differ on Kubica and his role. So did David Hobbs on that. Whether it's been a good role for Williams, hard to tell because they've been so bad. Obviously, they've improved recently from where they were.
And the pace on Robert's side of the garage has not been matched with what Russell's doing.
But he scored a point.
He did score a point. The one time he beat him on the road, it really mattered. But what is the value of the veteran presence of Kubica to push Russell, to educate Russell, and to develop the car? Same thing with Romain Grosjean.
Yep.
He may not be the most reliable race driver on the grid in 2019, but he understands that car had issues and misgivings as far back as Catalunya and said, I think this is the wrong way to go. And they still went that way to their own detriment. So there's value in a driver who may not be the quickest person in a single qualifying lap, as long as they're not costing you points hand over fist by just being an idiot on race day. There is a value to a driver like that, especially with the lack of testing that we see in F1 now.
Let's just take this rumor and say one of them is out at Mercedes, or at least temporarily out, whether it's Bottas or whether it's Ocon. Is Renault in that Hülkenberg seat the most likely place for either one of them, or does it change if Bottas is the man let go?
I think any team up and down the grid, every single team up and down the grid should have a look at Valtteri Bottas if he comes free. just because he hasn't beaten Lewis Hamilton doesn't mean he's damaged goods. He is a fantastic driver, and when he is on, you can't touch him.
Mm-hmm.
I think Lewis has found that out. I mean, look at Australia. He dominated that race, and even if Lewis had damage, that's still a race that he won pretty much from qualifying. And the effort he's put forth and the growth that he's shown in his stint at Mercedes, whether that's prolonged for another year or more, or if it ends at the end of the 2019 campaign, I think Bottas has done himself proud and clearly belongs in Formula One. And Ocon is obviously someone who belongs in Formula One. And it's good to see. It looks like the rumor mill is pointing towards an opening for one of those two drivers, not necessarily in the top 6, but whoever doesn't get that Silver Arrow seat will be fighting at the top of the midfield. So that's good for us as race fans to watch that.
Yeah, good point. All right, let's get to our picks real quick. There's a little bit of other F1 news I want to talk about, but let's go ahead since we're kind of wrapping up Spa here. I'm going to let you go first. Who do you like as the winner of the race at Spa?
The Monegasque. Charles Leclerc gets his first career win at Spa this weekend. I'm going out on a limb. I think Ferrari locks out the front row, and I think Leclerc is the one who can handle the heat from Mercedes if, in fact, we can believe your weather forecast.
Who would it not surprise you? Let's take Lewis out. Neither one of us can pick Lewis as a bogey because that's not really a bogey, but should it go a different direction, who do you like to kind of be that surprise guy from the upfront teams?
From the upfront teams, I'm looking at Alex Albon. There is
Boy, that'd be a story, wouldn't it?
Unprecedented attention. Well, what was the last time Red Bull threw a driver just out of Toro Rosso and threw him in the car? Was that Max Verstappen winning at Spain in his very first race for Red Bull?
So you're saying there's history here.
Lightning can strike twice. I think the world of Alex Albon, I'm not expecting him to go out and podium, but I need him to go out and beat the cars he's supposed to beat and beat them handily. That is what Christian Horner is looking for. That is what Helmut Marko is looking for. This is an audition, and he's got to get out there and impress early and often.
Give me your midfield MVP.
Kimi Räikkönen.
Nice. Look at you. Alpha.
Kimi Räikkönen is a master at Spa. He's got 4 victories there. That's more than anyone else in the grid. That's more than Lewis. That's more than Sebastian Vettel. I think that Kimi Räikkönen can rekindle some of that magic, and I do think that the Alpha is suited to this track. I think the Ferrari engine bolted in the back of that is going to be propelling them to the top of the midfield this week.
I'm going to give you kudos for at least making it interesting, because I'm not going to make it interesting at all.
You're going McLaren?
I'm going to chalk this entire thing. So I'm going with Lewis Hamilton to win the race. I'm going to go with the fact that they've found some extra party mode and some extra race mode in that engine over the break, and that they're going to be able to match Ferrari's speed. I just don't know that Ferrari can even if they have it, I haven't shown that they can even come up with a strategy that works. And I just think it's too hard to beat Mercedes when they're on a roll.
I'm going to interrupt you. I think they found every way to make a strategy not work. Sooner or later, they're bound to get it right, whether it's on purpose or by accident.
You might be right there. All right, my bogey, though, is going to be Charles Leclerc. If for some reason this does turn out to be similar to Bahrain and the Ferraris have the field covered, I think it's Leclerc, not Vettel, that goes to victory lane. And I think when that happens, the kind of talking that's already been there about Sebastian Vettel and whether or not he's the right guy for that car, I think that starts going even more in earnest. And then, as we said, you guessed it, my midfield MVP is going to be Carlos Sainz. Great story that's out there. If you follow all the F1 news about how, not being able to have it work at other teams he's run for has really worked for him this year. It didn't work for him when he was in the Red Bull thing running back then. It didn't work for him at Renault, but McLaren has kind of revitalized the career of Carlos Sainz.
I like it. We'll see.
All right, the one other piece to F1 news, we've kind of talked about the schedule and everything for a while, and both Eric and I were really concerned that Catalunya might come off the schedule. Obviously, they do their preseason testing there. A beautiful racetrack. It has incredible flow. For whatever reason, the racing's really not ever that good, and it's not a big strategy place. But the good news to all of us who love that region of Spain, Barcelona, it's back. Catalonia's back.
Was it multi-year or is it just a year-by-year deal?
I want to say through 21, but I could be wrong. So I think it's a 2-year deal, but don't quote me on that. I don't have it right in front of me.
It would be unconscionable to think that Spain wouldn't have a race when we're this close to the reign of Fernando Alonso. I mean, it's been a long time since he won a world championship. It's been a handful of seasons since he was really a contender for wins and podiums, but he just left the sport. To think that the Spanish Grand Prix would depart on the heels of Alonso, that would be a real shame for the sport in Spain as it stands right now. Still, Carlos Sainz is running there. As you mentioned, beautiful flowing racetrack, one of my favorite ones to drive in the video game. I think the qualifying session there is mega, and I really like the first lap. The first corner there, one of my favorite first corners in F1, that one and maybe Suzuka. What I like about it is you don't really jam all the way down on the brakes and go down 4 or 5 gears from your standing
Hobbs liked that one
start.
too. He thought that was a good way to open up the race as well.
Yeah, because it gives you options to get through the corner. You can take a wide entry and try to get a good launch off of that and get through turn 2 and try to set somebody up for turn 3, kind of like Hamilton did on Rosberg in 2016. You've seen Alonso make some moves on the outside there. It's a real thinking man's first corner. I like that, so I'm glad it's staying on the course, even if the racing doesn't always pan out to be the most exciting just due to lack of overtaking. Hey, if it sticks around through 2021, that could be a great test ground to see how well these ground effect cars are alleviating the issues that we're seeing with aerodynamic and dirty air problems in terms of overtaking.
Absolutely, and it's not new news. It was a couple of weeks ago, but we never really covered it on the podcast. Mexico City coming back once again to the schedule, and I know that track race is really good as well. They get big crowds out there for that.
And it's a bogey track because it's at altitude.
Here's the funny thing, though. Formula One obviously wants to try to get some type of cost cap going, but they keep adding tracks, and they keep saying they either want to keep it the same as where it is or maybe bump it up one. But at the point right now, like, what's going to go?
Well, They've
got too many tracks for not enough spots.
Well, Hockenheim's on the chopping block, and we don't like that. They almost have to, at the point where they've got to start rotating every other year with some of these tracks that are coming in. You may not be able to have a Dutch Grand Prix every single year. Maybe it alternates with Hockenheim or something like that. But
I don't see a problem with that personally.
Yeah,
of course,
that's above my pay grade, of course. But when you mention the cost cap, Tony, the whole point of the cost cap spending isn't that they're spending too much money going to races. It's that Mercedes, Ferrari outspend Racing Point and Williams by such a huge margin that it's so unfair that they can't ever close that gap and make a race of it. I think that's the point of the spending cap.
No, you're 100% right. But if they add, let's say the schedule goes to 24 or 25 races, you're gonna need more power units.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's where it gets tricky.
And that's what Ferrari said. You keep adding tracks, and you want to make this bigger, and why not? Formula One feels like it's on another resurgence, right? Every track we've gone to, at least in the last, 6 or 7 races, the stands are packed. Like people, and we even joked about this on the last podcast. It's amazing how many people are there, given the fact that Lewis has dominated this season. Like Ferrari's not even, they're the big draw at most racetracks. Are red flags everywhere, that and Max and just crazy people in orange. People are coming out in droves to watch this season. If I'm Liberty Media, who's got this huge chunk of money out there, I want to add more races too, but it's kind of hard to do that and then cap the teams back down.
Yeah.
And Ferrari's concerned about that. If Vettel came out and said, the math's not adding up here, guys, you're going to have to start pulling some away.
We saw this in NASCAR in the 1990s when you have the license to print your own money because things are going so well.
You in trouble.
Yeah. I think our biggest problem was that a lot of our racetracks overbuilt themselves. And now that the sport's contracted a little bit, there's nowhere to go other than removing seats and trying to figure out ways to do your weekend more efficiently as NASCAR is kind of overhauling their schedule next year and things like that. I'm sure the people at Formula One are aware of that ebb and flow that's kind of happened in North America, and it was preceded by a big lull in open wheel racing over here, and it's starting to come back. Did you see that crowd at Gateway? I know we'll get into that a little bit later. You mentioned the awesome crowd at Road America. The crowd was fantastic at VIR, and the stands, at least on the front stretch, were jam-packed outside of St. Louis for the Indycar race on an oval. So that's all good news for us racing fans.
Yeah, Eric, it's, again, motorsports, the rumors of its demise, I think, are greatly overstated as we've seen over the last few weeks. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back from the break, we are going to recap the exciting IndyCar race that was at Gateway. We've got a Morse Code report. Lots of fun coming up right after this.
Here's your chance to win a set of your very own Hercules tires. Go to HerculesTires.com/MRN. Simply register, and each month we'll give away one set of tires. Hercules Tires has the value, selection, and industry-leading mileage coverage to get you wherever you need to go, no matter where the road takes you. Register now for your chance to win a set of Hercules tires at HerculesTires.com/MRN. Hercules Tires. Ride on our street.
Welcome back to American Racing Snobs. How about that, Eric? You can get free tires at HerculesTire.com/MRN. Every month they're giving away. So they've given away, 7 sets of tires? People are getting tires. You know, here's the deal. I know I've talked to some people, and they're like, why would I don't need tires. Tires are never fun to buy when you need them. It's like, what do you say to people? Hey, check out my new tires. If you get new wheels, hey, check out my new wheels. Those are great. But when you say tires, it's kind of like, okay, they're blacking around.
When you need them, you need them.
Yeah. So, man, you got to take advantage of that. Sign up. Get yourself maybe you win. Get yourself some free tires. If you do, let us know. Send us a tweet and say, won those tires from American Racing Snobs, thanks to our partners at Hercules Tires. All right, let's talk a little IndyCar action over at Gateway. What is it? WorldwideTechnology.com. They had the longest name
that K&N
for
race?
a K&N race I've ever seen.
My God.
But
here, I'm going to look it up in a little bit here and see if I can recite the entire thing. That might take up the second half of this podcast.
You teased the great crowd. I thought it was phenomenal for that race. Beautiful night, gorgeous sunset. And I'll tell you what, those open wheel boys didn't waste any time in getting after the program. I mean, the first lap was nuts.
It was an exciting race from top to bottom. The cautions kind of juggled things towards the end and shuffled the order
it did.
up.
It changed the whole race a little bit.
Well, we saw Takuma Sato
Takuma Sato.
Yeah, it's
Takuma Sato.
It's worry-free philosophy after all of the hard knocks and licks that he took from that opening lap crash at Pocono. And huge credit to Rahal Letterman Lanigan for putting out like a statement supporting their driver, saying, we reviewed the video, we believe his stance is correct, and that there's an argument to be made for what Takuma was saying, because a lot of drivers were speaking out against the way that Takuma was driving at Pocono on that first lap.
I give him props for just not climbing out of the car in victory lane and giving everybody a giant old middle finger. That's what I'd have done.
That was awesome that he did that. And how about Ed Carpenter and Tony Kanaan? What a feel-good podium. I know they weren't running up front the entire race. I honestly thought that we were looking at a Dale Coyne 1-2. The way things were shaking out. Sebastian Bourdais racing Santino Ferrucci, and Bourdais actually threw it in the fence. Looked like he was on cold tires coming out
he
of
said
the...
I don't even know what happened. Gets into the fence, and the car's sliding. The right rear, it looked like the axle broke or the wheel well broke. What has happened to Seabass?
That was unfortunate, because I think that was the best race car he's had all season. Ferrucci, amazing speed. Now...
That dude, his hand-eye coordination, his fast-twitch muscles are insane. He's good. He's a little crazy, but he's good.
So there are two types of Santino Ferrucci observers. I was going to say fans, but I'm not sure that's the right word for it. There are two schools of thought, and I've noticed that it's divided among the people who watched him when he raced in Europe versus the people who only know him from the IndyCar series. I was talking to Dylan Welch about this when we were out in Road America about this. He had never seen him race in Formula 3 or Formula 2. I'm going to try to be as polite as I possibly can. He was a friggin' weapon in Formula 2. He got banned and then fired by his team for intentionally crashing into his teammate after the race. He only had one really impressive qualifying session to me, and that was at Monaco. And that was the year that and I don't want to ding him for this because this happened to a lot of people, but he stalled on the grid, lost his entire advantage, and that could have been a breakout session for him, but he wasn't the only person stalling last year frequently in GP2 or Formula 2. That was a series-wide issue. But the impression of Ferrucci was not a positive one. And just because he had a good run at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the novice open-wheel fan Dale Earnhardt Jr. took a liking to him, I was kind of hesitant. I'm like, just because you had a good run at Indy doesn't undo a year and a half of extremely questionable driving in Europe. Because he was an American racing in Europe. Of course I'm going to follow his career. I want to see if he can get to F1. He finds a home in the IndyCar series, and he has done a wonderful job in this fight for Rookie of the Year with Felix Rosenqvist and Colton Herta. Now, let's get into what we saw at Gateway. A lot of pace, a lot of talent.
Aggressive.
Great reaction timing. He kept putting himself in positions, and it didn't seem like he was learning from it. Like, he kept going to the outside, and you can't make that move there. Yeah. He'd nearly crash, and then he'd save it somehow. It was amazing how he kept saving
his
it.
Twitch muscles, that just quick with he's amazing at that.
He could have won that race. I think if he made better decisions about when to try to pass someone and when to ride, I think he wins that race. And that's hugely ahead of where I thought Santino Ferrucci would be. And I know I came in with a biased opinion, and I'm trying to keep an open mind, especially as a journalist here. I think he's tremendously talented. I think he missed an opportunity, though. That could have been a race win for him. I think he ended up, 4th or 5th? It was a really ambitious move on, I think it was Tony Kanaan for 3rd at the end.
Right at the end.
Put himself in a bad spot, put the championship leader, Joseph Newgarden, in a bad spot where he had to spin to avoid him. Now, if you're a racing driver, sometimes you got to go for it, but I think Ferrucci proved in Gateway that he's not quite sure when to go for it.
Yeah. We talked a week ago or so that here comes Scott Dixon. Every time you think Scott Dixon's out of it, here comes Scott Dixon. Problems with his car, the radiator issue early in the race, sent him back to the garage. That might be the final blow to a championship run for Scott Dixon. It's hard to say. You still got double points out there.
70 points.
Final oval of the year, but yeah, that was kind of the dagger that team didn't need.
Yeah, that was, you hate to see it decided by a mechanical. But sooner or later, that luck's going to catch up to him. He's had a couple things fall into his lap going the other way, but Scott Dixon now 70 points back. 2 races remain, but double points are out there. But it's not just one driver he's got to catch. Yeah. It's Newgarden, it's Pagenaud, and it's Rossi. He needs problems from all 3 of those guys because Rossi's now 3rd, 46 back. So that's still a 24-point margin from him to get back to 3rd. But he's still Scott freaking Dixon, so you never know. A couple guys I want to give shout-outs to. Let's give a call to Connor Daly, former guest
really
of the
good,
show.
Yeah.
Great drive for Carlin. I think that's the best they've looked all year. Drove all the way up to 6th. Also want to spare a thought for our guest last week, old Jimmy Hinchcliffe's. Fantastic race car.
Led some of the race.
Led 20 laps, and then he got hosed on a restart. Same story, different racetrack for him in terms of great car speed, and something just keeps him from getting the finish.
I thought we had the mojo there for him. I really did.
Yeah, I wanted to give him the Racing Snobs bump there. Ended up in the 12th position, but really great car speed for James Hinchcliffe there. Recapping the point standings following Gateway, Joseph Newgarden did exactly what he needed to do. Even though he spun out on the final lap, he now has a 38-point lead over Simon Pagenaud. Alex Rossi now 46 back as Pagenaud back into 2nd place. What is it with Joseph Newgarden pointing the wrong way on the final lap? Because that happened a couple weeks ago at Mid-Ohio, too. That one is hard to explain. This one, he had Ferrucci in front of him. He was lucky that a lot of those cars that went whizzing by him to the finish were a lap down. Because at first I thought Rossi got by him. I'm like, that's huge. And it was kind of an unusual situation for Newgarden because there was the slow car of Ferrucci who had to bail out big time after misjudging his move on Tony Kanaan. Kind of affected the running order there. But it did promote Connor Daly 1 spot there. So Joseph Newgarden, 2 races stand between him and a 2nd IndyCar championship.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun to see these guys finish out the year. All right, Eric, take a deep breath because it's that special time of the day. It's time for the Morse Code Report.
Well, Tony, as we mentioned earlier, I actually got to attend the IMSA race at VIR. gorgeous racing facility, a great crowd, and it was only the GT categories, no prototypes allowed, so it was GTLM, their 8 machines, and the GTD class. It was the last time I will get to set eyes on the Ford GT factory program. It's one of the main reasons I drove up there. That's just a stunning race car, and I'm going to miss it terribly.
I like when it's
forward.
only GT weekend. I wouldn't want it all the time, but I like seeing just the 10 tops out there running occasionally. It brings me back to my childhood a little bit.
It was a really great atmosphere at the event, and it was another Porsche 1-2, and there was a late caution. We got going. Catherine Legg had a huge crash heading towards where the oak tree used to be. I believe it was a tire failure sent her into the
That's not
wall.
where you want one.
Nope, that was one of the worst places on the track to have that happen. I actually got to talk to her co-driver, Alice Powell, who was the victor of the final W Series race at Brands Hatch, and she's excited to continue on in that series towards Season 2 as the plans are still coming together for that.
Did you ask her at all about Jamie Chadwick?
I did not get to ask her about
That would be
Jamie
kind of
Chadwick.
rubbing it in a little bit, like, is she the real deal?
Yeah, I didn't ask her
Probably,
that.
probably a bad idea.
Do you have a Williams contract yet? No. Okay. As I was saying, Porsche ended up 1-2 in the race. Tony, there was that late caution. I have never seen a race where 7 of the 8 cars in the top class were running nose to tail at the end of the race, all on the lead lap, and I never felt like the result was in question. Those Porsches just had everyone covered. It was kind of a Noah's Ark finish. It was 2 Porsches followed by 2 Corvettes, then the 2 Ford GTs, and then the 2 BMWs, all line astern. One of the BMWs was a lap down, but they came across like they were getting on Noah's Ark.
The Corvettes have kind of disappointed me this season, but knowing that they're going to have a new car next year in the mid-engine C8, I'm sure a lot of development has gone into that car, and they probably haven't developed this current C7 that much. I don't know. I haven't been in the garage area in 4 years since we covered that series, so I'm a little of a neophyte as to what's going on, but just kind of feels that way. The Corvettes have been off a little this year.
I heard something interesting from your buddy, Mr. John Hindhaugh, that because the new Corvette has not been homologated and the start of the WEC is next weekend with their super season, their next race is Silverstone this coming Sunday. That's the start of their season. Because the rear-engine Corvette is not in production yet.
Mid-engine.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, mid-engine. The old front-engine Corvette. Yeah, you are. It was a bit of a long day watching all those Corvettes come into Road America with you and you saying what you liked and didn't like about each and every single one of them.
I'm going to get one soon.
So, the front-engine Corvette will be the only option for Chevrolet at Le Mans next year because the mid-engine is not homologated in time to run next year's Le Mans. So they could be in the awkward situation of running the new car at Daytona and the rest of the IMSA schedule and then having to run the old car in the WEC.
Interesting. I'd like to see if that happens. I know they've tested the new car at Sebring. I've seen video of that, so interesting to see how that plays out. I'm certainly John would know if anybody knows.
I want to give a shout-out to our GT Daytona winner at VIR, Mr. Ben Keating.
There he is.
And his teammate, Jeroen Bleekemolen, this time for Mercedes, not the Ford GT that they thought they won Le Mans in. Actually, that car was there in the spectator area. I got to drool over that. I think I sent you a picture of that one.
Did.
Yeah, that's a pretty car. They were able to get the win for Mercedes AMG ahead of Acura and Ferrari. Keating and Bleekemolen getting the victory. Speaking of Jeroen Bleekemolen, do you know what he was doing on Saturday?
I do, but I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's a little southern.
Yeah, South Boston, Virginia, at the short track, the little classic bull ring there. Got behind the wheel of a late model, qualified in the 6th position. I think he had some mechanical gremlins that kept him from finishing, but I love that the Dutch driver would just head over, try something new, maybe got a couple bologna burgers there.
He's going to have a hard time walking through the paddock getting that NASCAR all over him.
Oh, something else that was really cool at VIR. This happened before I got there because I rolled up just as the grid walk was starting on Sunday. I believe on Saturday there was a special Ford presentation and demonstration laps, and our boy Ryan Briscoe got to demo Scott McLaughlin's Australian Supercar at VIR, and that was also on display in the spectator areas there. So it was really cool to see that machinery up close in person.
Yeah, and one thing out of the IMSA, we don't talk a ton about IMSA on here, but our good buddy who we've known for a long time, raced in NASCAR, has had such a successful career in IMSA, Colin Brown, announcing that he won't be coming. That team's basically not going to run anymore, and Colin doesn't know what he's going to do. That would talk about a super free agent being out there.
That'd be a great pickup for anybody.
Stud.
I'm sure he'll get something in the Enduros, and if he can impress there, that phone will keep ringing, keep him
Core
employed.
Autosport not coming back.
Yeah, John Bennett deciding to hang up the old gentleman driver's helmet. He's had a really great run.
One of the best gentleman drivers.
Gentleman drivers aren't supposed to be in the prototype category. Yeah. They're supposed to be in GTD or the Prototype Challenge, LMP2, something like that. They've pulled off race wins, and that is absolutely stunning against the competition that you see right now in IMSA. I mentioned that Australian Supercar. They were in action this weekend, 2 rounds at the Bend, and it was all Scotty McLaughlin dominating, getting both race victories. That gives him now 16 on the year. Tony, you know why that matters?
Why does that matter, Eric?
It's tied the record set by Craig Lowndes for most wins in a season, going back to 1996, and there are still 8 races left for the Australian Supercars, including the big one, the Bathurst 1000, a race that Scotty has never won. If he wins that race, he's coming to NASCAR. I don't think it'll happen next year, but he is coming stateside. Remember that name, Scotty McLaughlin. He is a bad mamma jamma.
Isn't Hinchcliffe going over there? Hinchcliffe and somebody are going over there.
Alex Rossi.
That's right.
They are the wild card entry for the Bathurst 1000 for Walkinshaw Andretti Autosport.
And did I hear at one point in time that Supercars has been looking at a possible U.S. race? I
haven't heard anything recently. They did
that
it one time.
rumor was out there for a while that they'd like
once.
to come back.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I actually went to that race.
Did you?
It was at COTA.
Why wouldn't you have?
I know. It's the one and only time I've made it to COTA because we're always working when F1's there.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a 400-kilometer race. It was actually 4 separate 100K races with separate qualifyings, standing starts. Oh, my God. That was so stinking cool to see in person.
Those cars are fun.
They didn't beat the crap out of each other like I was hoping. I think it's because their spares were half a world away. So they kind of behaved themselves a little bit. I'm not sure if the course played into that either. However, the Australian Supercars, it's a foregone conclusion that Scotty McLaughlin will win this Drivers' Championship. It's just how many records will fall on the way, and can he get the big one that has eluded him, the Bathurst 1000? We'll find out in October when that Mount Panorama circuit hosts their main event. Some other things going around. Let's see. Guess who drove in the Suzuka 10 hours last weekend?
Fernando Alonso.
No, close. It is a 2-time Formula One world champion, though.
Don't know.
Mika Hakkinen.
Oh, nice.
Age 50, 6 years since the last time he turned a wheel in anger. I believe he finished 7 laps down. Still had fun out there, had a clean race. Also some news out of DTM. Do you know what DTM stands for, Tony?
Deutsche Touring Machine.
You're very close. Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters.
Is that basically the English? Did I come up with the German touring machine? Am I close?
I think it's master. You know, like masters in like professional drivers instead of machines. But
I only speak Italian and not very well. Grazie, ragazzi.
They're going to need your Italian because they're looking at Monza for their schedule in 2020. That would be unbelievable to see big, heavy
skip the
German
chicane
stock
on lap
cars.
1 on the start. I propose that for F1. Let's skip the chicane on the opening start. Let them just haul ass.
Chaos.
Be nuts.
Absolute chaos.
Be cool.
I can't wait to see these big cars trying to get around Monza. We'll see if that happens.
They talked about a US DTM class at one point in time, too. I don't think it ever came about.
No, touring cars have been hard to gain footing here, and it's a shame because they'd be so much fun. You and I were talking about how much fun NASCAR is on a road course, you know, whether it's Xfinity or Cup, and how they've added the Roval now, and in the last decade, we've seen Road America, Mid-Ohio, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Before that, Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City being added to the Xfinity schedule. Mosport now for the trucks. It is a huge amount of fun, especially since they get more argy and bargy than our sports car friends who have all those driving standards. If you like a little bit of forearm shiver with your road racing, that's the way to go is touring cars. Tony, coming up, it's a huge weekend. On Sunday, you and I will be in the Palmetto State talking about NASCAR and the throwback weekend and all that fun stuff. But if you're waiting for that race to start that evening, there's so much to watch. The World Endurance Championship starts their new super season at Silverstone with I believe that's the 6-hour race. Then IndyCar Their penultimate round is at Portland, another beautiful road course in the Pacific Northwest.
And it's been hot there.
It sure has. Those
That's
people
odd this time of year.
You remember Paul Bartholomew?
Yes.
I'm sure he is spontaneously combusted. That boy did not like it if it got over 65 degrees.
He could sweat.
Oh, yeah. He'd turn bright red. He'd bring the hotel towel with him to pit road
I know.
every single weekend.
The sweatiest on-air talent I've ever seen.
By far.
Camera.
By far. So they'll be in action. Indycar at Portland. And finally, the big one, Tony. Finally, our summer shutdown is over. Is this the most anticipated race of the year or the second most?
It's one of them. All I can tell you is for the last 2 weeks, my 9-year-old has woke up every Sunday going, do we have a Formula One race? And I'm like, I wish we did. Well, this weekend we do, and I'm stoked for it.
All right, Tony has got Lewis Hamilton. I have got Charles Leclerc, and I'm looking for Kimi Räikkönen to defeat Lando Norris in the midfield. We'll see if any of that comes true. We'll see what the weather does, if the Mercedes can handle the heat, if Ferrari can get out of their own way, and if Alex Albon can impress in his debut race for Team Red Bull. We'll all find out next week, Tony. American Racing Snobs.
As always, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, MRN.com, wherever your podcast can be found. Give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment. We always like to hear it. For Eric Morse, I'm Tony Rizzuti. As he said, we'll talk to you next time on American Racing Snobs.